External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of the SCO Summit in Astana and discussed an early resolution of remaining issues in the border areas. After the meeting, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that the two sides agreed to enhance efforts through diplomatic channels and military channels to resolve the pending issues. He also asserted that respecting the line of actual control and ensuring peace in the border areas was essential, adding that its principles of mutual respect, mutual sensitivity and mutual response would guide the bilateral ties between India and China. Meanwhile, a day ago, Xi Jinping also urged the SCO to stand for justice and fairness, asserting that the real challenges come from outside forces who interfere in internal affairs and create division. Well, this also comes a few days after Chinese President Xi Jinping invoked the 1954 Panchsheel Agreement as a way of resolving contemporary geopolitical issues and conflicts. But the big question that we talk about is, will Xi practice what he preaches? To talk more about this on the show, joining us is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat. Mr. Rabindra Sachdev, international affairs expert, also joins us on the show. Major General G.G. Dwivedi, global strategic and defense expert, also with us on the program. Last but by no means the least, Namrata Hasija, Center for China Analysis and Strategy, also with us on the broadcast. Ambassador Goel, I'll begin with you, sir. We've heard this line many a times before. Both the ministers and both the parties have met on several occasions, and the same thing, hackneyed thing is repeated over and over again, that we will further the efforts to resolve the issues that still stand at the border. But the fact of the matter is that these have been long-standing disputes, and China continues to not only irk India but the Western world as well. You see what's happening in the South China Sea as well, and that is a geopolitical concern for India as well. How do you read these statements, and do they really amount to anything? Ambassador Goel, I ask you this because you are a seasoned diplomat, you understand the intricacies and the nitty-gritties, and reading between the lines when somebody says something as plain as we are working on it.
Vinit, thank you very much. Good evening. And I think I must compliment you and NewsX for starting a discussion on something which other channels have yet to take up. And I'm saying, I will explain to you why. I think this meeting that took place was different from the other meetings in some ways. I would not call it was a very important meeting, but it was significant, the language which has come through. There are slight changes. You said hackneyed line, yes, resolving issues, etc., etc. But when is the last time you heard about resolving the issue and respect for each other's mutual interests, mutual sensitivities, and mutual understanding? Long, long time ago. I'm hearing this mutuality of interest, etc., after a very, very long time. That reminds me of 1988 when I was in China and the historic visit of Rajiv Gandhi, when we began to talk about resolving issues and developing relations on the basic, we used to call it MUMA, mutual understanding and mutual accommodation. That became the watchword at that time. So for the Chinese, mutuality of interest, mutuality of understanding, sensitivities is a kind of watchword that they are interested in working further on the basis of that mutuality with the concerned party. Number one. Number two, the fact is that if you look at the statement issued after the meeting this time, I do get a sense here that unlike in the other meetings where the resolution of the border disputes or the progress at least on the border issues became a kind of a conditionality for any further development in the bilateral relations. And I'm again saying it on the basis of my own experience. And you said reading between. So there is no mention here in this that any progress on the border dispute, etc., is a must before we can talk about any further progress in bilateral relations. Clearly, resolution of the bilateral issues, etc., is all mentioned there, but not as a conditionality. So I think that is very, very significant. There are some things more which I would want to say, but let us put it this way, that there have been speculations, and I've seen some reports, that both India and China, for their various important foreign policy imperatives, do want to get out of the current logjam. And that interest is not just an Indian interest. Indications are that the Chinese are also interested in getting out of the logjam, but it is going to be a very, very difficult and long process. I would feel that what happened yesterday at the meeting between Wang Yi and Minister Jaishankar was an indication of that interest on the two sides. How it progresses further is anybody's guess. We will have to wait and see, because, as they say, there are many slits between the cup and the lip. Let us see what happens. But I think from that point of view, the meeting was important. Vineet.
Appreciate your thoughts on that, sir. In fact, General Dwivedi, the former Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and his Chinese counterpart, Zhao Enlai, if I'm not mistaken, signed the Panchsheel in 1954. So 5 of those principles were mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, which of course China has thrown out the window. Mutual non-aggression, another aspect which China doesn't really show, particular empathy towards. Mutual non-interference, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. Do these tenets, General Dwivedi, have any kind of a value today, considering there's so much water that has flown under the bridge, a hypothetical bridge between India and China?
Well, Vineet, I think you have covered some very important dimensions. First and foremost, diplomacy is all about dialogue. And I hold a bifocal view, because I was in China as defense attaché for good 3 years, and also commanded my troops against China for more than twice. The issue is this, that first and foremost, we tend to see Chinese actions ball by ball. That's not the case. We have to take an entire picture. To that extent, I think this meeting was nothing very significant, is part of the dialogue and part of the diplomacy. But we need to understand that Chinese don't actually mean what they say. And to judge Chinese, we need to see the ground actions. And let's come to the actual discussion of what is actually happening on the ground and what is happening on the diplomatic table. On the ground, 5 years back, it's over the 5th year, in 2020, the Chinese came with a massive troops, and they came and occupied the areas which were actually unheld. Thereafter, 21 rounds of talks had taken place. We had disengaged from 3 locations, but we have not de-escalated. Still, about 50 to 60,000 troops are facing each other in Ladakh. Across the LAC, in fact, I wrote an op-ed about a month back on this situation, that when you see a larger picture, Chinese have a grand design. First and foremost, they have fortified Tibet. Exponentially. Whether you take airports, you take the roads, you take the railways, and now last week only they did a landing of J-20 stealth fighters there. Point number 1. Second issue is how they have fortified the LAC. 620 villages, Shaokang, have been constructed. 125 are still in pipeline. That means that LAC today is no more being patrolled, it is being contested. And we had instance in Tawang, we had instance in Neoma, and therefore the LAC is actually being fortified further. The third important point is the Chinese have a line, and their stated line is, let's deal in the border issue from the rest of the bilateral relations. And that's what exactly is happening. You see our trade. Our trade last year is $132 billion, the highest trade ever, and we have a negative balance of, negative balance of trade to the tune of $100 billion. So therefore, in summation, what I want to say is that don't judge the Chinese one event by other event. You need to take a very holistic picture. These meetings are part of the dialogue process, but actually speaking, we have not actually de-escalated. Our deployment remains. And the third important point is we need to take a larger look at what the Chinese designs are. And Chinese designs are very clear. They have fortified Tibet, they have fortified the LAC, they have fortified the borders, and they will be negotiating from their position. So far, negotiation has gone as per their design. There are new protocols, buffer zones have been created, and they have refused to budge from the Depths and DBO area and Dam Chowk. Vineet.
Absolutely right, sir. And Amita, in fact, the Panchsheel's ethos have continued to influence global events. But if you look at China and India and our relationship with China from that particular prism, it's really fallen off the track that was perhaps anticipated by the first Prime Minister of the country, Jawaharlal Nehru, as well. But, I would really like to take a leaf out of what General Dwivedi also said, because that, in a way, is a compendium, it's a synopsis of what really happens when you actually try and have any kind of an outreach with China. You really cannot take them for what they say. You can't take them for their word. How do you deal with a person or a country like that?
We need, I'd like to make 3 points, because we are discussing, of course, when we are discussing the Wang Yi and our external affairs minister's meeting with him, we need to keep 3 things in mind. One, I will actually quote from one of the papers that Hu Shisheng, who works for Kikir. Now, Kikir is their think tank that is directly linked to their intelligence wing. So he wrote an article, and let me quote just 2 lines from that, and that will tell you what the Chinese actually think about India and India-China relations. Now, he said that since both countries got independence, so he's taken it back to actually when India and China got independence, or according to them, when PRC was created, that a clash between the 2 nations was inevitable. The second thing he says that is that border issue is not the major issue. The major issue is dominance, and dominance in the region. And both countries are eyeing for that, and China will dominate this region. So let's take this as something that is coming from the elites, that, because when we talk about China, we talk about the CCP, that they are the ones forming the policy. So this. Second, there was a interview that was taken by Asahi Shimbun, the Japanese newspaper, some years back, 3-4 years back, where they interviewed a Politburo member, and they asked him, what about, because you're claiming South China Sea, you're claiming parts of India, you're claiming, Taiwan. What is your view on it? Will China actually be a responsible power and, not claim this? He said, we have grown up studying and reading that these parts, these areas are part of China, and we will take it. If not today, then tomorrow. Then, of course, the third thing is that we have to see, like Colonel Dwivedi sir said, he said it very nicely, that we have to match their actions with what they are saying. So you look at the military buildup, especially in Ningchir, and other areas that are adjacent to India, huge military buildup, and that is not going anywhere. So we have to take all these things into mind. We've had several rounds of talks at the highest commander levels. We've also, but have any of us ever come across one single mention on the tensions with India by Xi Jinping anywhere? Nowhere. Then another thing, that when the 20th Party Congress happened, where the past, present, and future cadres of, this CCP are there, they played the Galwan Valley clip. So that clearly shows what the Chinese think of India. Yes, it's good, we are talking diplomacy, but where is it going? Right now, there is zero trust, especially what happened after Galwan and, the way the Chinese have dealt with it. So I personally, I don't see, the Chinese being really serious about when they say that they are going to, talk and resolve issues.
Absolutely. And Mr. Sachdev, it also seems that the Chinese perhaps may also be biding time, in cultivating a sense of camaraderie and a projection of hope which may never arrive.
Thank you, Vinith. Great question and a great conversation, sir. No, absolutely, yes. I mean, biding time, and we do not know with what perspective are they preparing for Taiwan, and therefore biding for time. And once in their long-term vision, after 10 years, when they have assimilated Taiwan, then they turn their attention to India. Now, let's kind of work on India. Absolutely right, the time, and what are they biding for? Couple of things. I think obviously fantastic points have come out. I'll pick one or two and then maybe dig in a bit deeper. Firstly, yes, it has to be a matter of political will. These talks which are happening at commander level, corps level, etc., they are, I would say, pardon it, they're meaningless. These are the army, who cannot take decisions of give and take. Okay, I mean, they will definitely do what the mandate is given to them. Yeah, definitely, yes, they are being on the ground, they can identify more things. But this whole thing essentially needs political will and at the top leaders level. As I think one of earlier said that Xi has never talked about it. So till the time Xi Jinping and Modi ji sit down and make a grand bargain, if not a grand bargain, a baby step to a grand bargain, perhaps nothing much will move beyond whatever we are. The core issue is, of course, from my understanding, I think all of us, the LAC, or rather the very definition of the LAC. What is the line of actual control? Okay, and where is it? It's a strip of land. Apparently, I imagine it's something like a river which is flowing from, one north of the east of India. The river somewhere is, maybe 10 miles wide, somewhere 100 miles wide, somewhere its river's edges are not known. So this notional, to my mind, is the LAC, the land which has to be where we make some claims and where they make their claims, right? On either shore of the river, or on one shore of the river are our, stations, and on the other shore of the river are the Chinese stations. So this is the contested part, perhaps. Okay, now, so till this very river is not defined, one, and that will happen only if, as I think Ambassador Goyal said, mutuality of interest. Okay, if there is a mutuality of interest, then only that can be defined. So, like it's a great beginning, as I think Minister Jaishankar said, respect for each other. But I mean, the respect has to be defined. I think that's a core issue. Okay, and so I mean, if the LAC can be defined and both sides agree that okay, these are our borders, then hey, presto, problem solved. But apparently, neither side will. A beginning can be made. Okay, one on the diplomatic front, and then I'll come to military quick and trade. Sometimes you have to carry. You can weaponize peace also. You have to carry some toys and gimmicks with you also. Why not? It can be, but okay, it cannot be said by the Indian government. I'll absolutely understand that. Across the LAC, there are apparently about 40 to 45, and General Dwivedi will know much better, disputed, zones, areas, whatever, right? Where we dispute, they dispute. So, and we each want to be on the vantage point. Why not pick one of them and say that, guys, okay, let's firewall this particular zone and let's call it notionally a garden of peace. Neither yours nor ours, locked in perpetuity. Without military disadvantage to us on the vantage points, and the Chinese will also not agree. So the challenge will be perhaps finding a flat piece of land, maybe in the central section of Uttarakhand side, wherever, where it's a flat area, fine, let's kind of demarcate it. Let that be a beginning to test their waters on the mutuality of interest, maybe. And then if this pilot kind of succeeds, then more and more. The challenge in this is that, who will say it, for example, who will pose this question? India will not, because whoever poses this idea would maybe come across weak negotiations-wise, right? So if the Chinese bring, should we consider? I don't know, but to my mind, that is one. Once something, what ahead? The path ahead is that. Lastly, on the issue of trade, yes, trade has grown, but, and it will grow. And we may say or do whatsoever, we cannot, divorce trade with China. The world is not able to, America is not able to. I mean, we need our solar equipment, where do we get? We need our telecommunication equipment, where do we get? Okay, we need our lithium batteries, where do we get? Right, we need the, APIs of pharmaceuticals, where do we get? Okay, so, I mean, the reality is that our trade with China will grow. Okay, the challenge then, therefore, is that simultaneously how to resolve this issue of the LAC. And the big picture is also agreed.
You're right, Mr. Sachdev. You're right, Mr. Sachdev. But, Ambassador Goyal, I would like to take a leaf out of what General Dwivedi also said, that diplomacy is the art of dialogue. But, how long are you supposed to rely on dialogue when, the fruit is far-fetched and it's not reaping the desired result for one party? So you're muted.
I'm on the mute, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm scratching my mind and trying to recall incidents in the history where our militaries have been able to establish peace. There have been wars, no doubt about it. But the peace is eventually established or achieved through dialogue only. And ultimately, in diplomacy, how much ever desperate you become, dialogue is the only way out. You persist with the dialogue. Why should Minister Jaishankar meet with Wang Yi? He could have very well said, no, sorry, thank you very much. You're still there in that area. Please withdraw immediately before we can talk. He didn't say that. In fact, this was just to answer your question because, I think Robinda made some very excellent points here, and so did you, Namrita. And let me recall when we mentioned about this article, it's a clash of civilization. It said contest for dominance in the area, domination. It is not about the border issue. Tibet, border issue, Xinjiang, etc. They're all symptomatic of the contest for dominance. And I think you said it really. That is the point. Now, coming back to the issues on ground, look at the whole statement. Earlier, they would say status quo ante must be achieved before we can have a progress in relations. What happened to the status quo? Where is that word, the mantra status quo in the statement? I don't see it there at all. Trust. You talk about trust. Please name me any two countries which have fully placed trust in each other. If they trusted each other, like even in the case of the USA and Europe, why would they have CIA, MI6, etc., etc., etc.? They spy on each other basically because verifiable information is the only way to verifiable trust. No trust can be absolute. And therefore, the countries do not work with each other on the basis of trust. They work on the basis of mutuality of interest, mutuality of concerns, need for each other. And therefore, I think we need to basically work out this discussion in two compartments. One, what exists on ground. And there I completely agree with Major General Dwivedi that what exists on ground is not comfortable at all. But what do we want? Do we want to continue with that uncomfortable situation for years to come? I said earlier that there are indications that we want to get out of the logjam. Logjam is not the border situation only. Logjam is the whole, that kind of stagnation in the relations when we can only think of growing trade deficit and we do not try and find a way out of it. I think in that sense, I must give credit to Minister Jaishankar and Prime Minister Modi. We are thinking ahead of what the relationship at the moment is and trying to see where we want to be, not on the basis of trust, but on the basis of where we want to be, what is in our interest. And that's the most important thing. Do we want to continue to depend upon certain groupings for our security forever? Do we want to continue on this growing trade deficit for building the relations forever? Why are we building our economy in that case? What is PLI all about? There are so many changes. I think we need to look further and we need to look at how to get out of the current impasse and develop the relations or at least have the kind of a relationship where we can feel securer and safer than now. We need.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. We've run out of time. We'll quickly take concluding thoughts from the remainder of our guests, starting with General Dwivedi.
Well, very briefly, Vineet, three important issues. First and foremost about China, you need to understand what is their strategic culture and what is their national objective. For China, stable periphery is very important. And to that extent, Xinjiang and Tibet are non-negotiable. As far as China's national aim is concerned, again, stability very important and they feel that India can foment trouble in Tibet. As far as LAC is concerned, situation currently, as General Pandey, the former chief said, is stable but sensitive. Therefore, LAC being contested. I think India needs to take some very tough political decisions. Firstly, we need to review our Tibet policy because that's where it's going to hurt Chinese. Secondly, we need to build greater partnership, more stable partnership, because China cannot be tackled alone. And thirdly, importantly, we need to keep building our military strength and economic strength because Chinese only negotiate with equals and never negotiate with unequals. Vineet.
Namita?
For me, I think, yes, I think Ambassador Goel talked about trust, but there has to be some trust. What I mentioned was that there is zero trust right now. So we have to like rebuild the relationship. So China has, we had so many agreements. So all that trust has gone, and to rebuild that relationship, we need to, yes, we need to talk. But again, we need to understand what the Chinese thinking and what they are aiming for. For me, I don't think, there will be a time when China and India can be partners because China does not look at India as a partner. And second, a lot in the future will also depend on China-US relation. Let's not factor that out.
Those are very good points. But the problem, Mr. Sachdev, is that, you're really not able to understand what China is thinking because, they are adept at the art of deception and deflection.
So are we.
Yes, so should we be, of course, and we are.
We are.
Sitting here, we say, and sitting.
Well, that's news. That's news to most of our panelists. But thank you for that.
One would assume, sir. Okay, quick. One would assume that we should also be practicing this art of deception, and the art of the deal. We should also be playing. Every player plays that, and we would be, and as they are. That said, in a big picture, yes, dominance. One end state, if there were to be an end state that I foresee could be, and which won't be, perhaps, is a frozen LAC. Both sides agree. You have some initial gardens of peace as a pilot, and then let's see where it can go.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.